From an early age, I've always loved playing arcade games, starting with Space Chaser in my local club. Holidays to Skegness and playing other games like Turbo, Donkey Kong, Mr. Do, and Sit Down Outrun. That was brilliant. The only way I could play them at home was using my computer, a Sinclair 48K ZX Spectrum. I remember thinking at the time how great it would be to own my own arcade machine, but they were very expensive. So I had to accept that the Spectrum was the best way to play them at that point in time. But I was always wanting to get an arcade machine one day. Over the next years, various games, machines and computers entered my house, such as the Sega Mega Drive, Amiga, Xbox and Sony PlayStation. But none stopped me from wanting an arcade machine. As PCs were overtaking the Commodore Amigas in terms of quality in the mid-90s, plus the fact developers were concentrating more on the PC side of things, games such as Carmageddon were making headlines. Interest in the Amiga almost disappeared, and more things started to appear for the PCs. On the 5th of February 1997, something was released, and shortly after it caught my eye. It wasn't another mock-up of Pac-Man like has happened in the past. This was an emulator of the actual ROMs from the arcade machines. ROMs are the chips that contain the game's program files to play the sounds and display the graphics. It was known as Mame, created by several people, but the one who became the most known is Nicola Salmoria. This version 0.1 was released on the 5th of February 1997. This amazed me. The quality was the same as the arcade, but with only a few games and only a keyboard to control the game. I still had the dream to own an arcade machine, and the dream was getting closer, albeit still a long, long way off. As my first PC had a DX4100 processor, then a Pentium P90, that started to struggle with newer games. I decided that I needed a new PC. A company I used to live near was very cheap for parts and regularly built PCs for many customers, so I was going to place an order for one as it was nearing Christmas and I wanted to treat myself. But my cousin was over from New Zealand and was working for a company that sold PC parts and said he would be able to obtain parts cheaper and better than them. As it happens, it's a good job I didn't buy from the other company, because when I was still deciding what to do, I found that the company had done a moonlight flit over Christmas and taken millions of pounds. They only ever dealt in cash as well. A few years after, with updates to Mame, I decided that I needed a newer PC, but this time I decided to build my own. After choosing an AMD Athlon 1.2 processor and other parts from DCS in Doncaster, I began to build it very carefully and slowly. The next best thing to a real arcade machine was a purpose-built sit-down arcade cabinet. I had it in the spare bedroom, but it had to be demolished when my eldest daughter needed a room of her own. As Mame was getting better and better, so were the requirements for faster PCs, but I was happy with the PC I'd built, and whilst it wouldn't play some arcade games perfectly smooth, I was beginning to use it much less than before. One day I decided to check eBay for Pac-Man items and noticed someone selling a dedicated Pac-Man arcade machine. This got me thinking back to my wanting an arcade machine, and I started to notice that more and more non-specific machines were appearing for sale for very reasonable prices. Having Mame with a few games and other emulators for computers and consoles, I decided that I needed something with minimum 3 buttons and 2 players. Size would be very important too, so nothing too big. My wife suggested that I get the wood and get one built, but I thought that would be too expensive, and looking at some machines on eBay, some were costing over £200, which is cheaper than buying the wood and other parts separately. However, I still didn't want to spend too much. At one point I saw a machine for £600 that had extra monitor above the main one that showed the marquee for each game when changed, but I felt it was still too expensive and wanted to use my own PC, not have a ready built one. After a few months of searching, I needed something within 10 miles and ideally no game in it. Someone was selling a Senti cabinet and it looked ideal for what I wanted, plus he only lived 7 miles away. When I arrived, he had several machines for sale, one with the glass, but it had a red joystick, and a black one that was larger and didn't look as well. The one I'd paid for on eBay had 2 red joysticks but no glass. We agreed that I would take the one with the glass for an extra cost. My friend helped me get the machine home. I removed the monitor and sold it. I also removed the wiring and cut part of the machine to make room to get the PC in. In order to be able to use the machine's joysticks and buttons, I had to buy a special USB cable with multiple wires to connect them to the PC. Next was the display. I had considered getting an arcade VGA connector for the arcade monitor, but the resolution won't be versatile enough. Also, as the arcade monitor was becoming rare, I decided to use a PC monitor or TV. I had a small LG widescreen TV spare, so I decided to use this in the arcade cabinet using the plastic game PCB holder to hold it in place. The horizontal games looked fine, but the vertical ones like 1942 looked quite small in comparison to the arcade version and disappointing, but they were playable nonetheless. Next, I needed to sort the sound. I'd already got a set of speakers with a bass unit that I'd used for years and thought I'd use those. However, they wouldn't fit in the speaker part of the machine due to the large fluorescent tube and the power to it that was located behind the poorly printed Terracaster marquee. I took the speakers apart and removed them for their housing and placed them above the speaker holes. I had to use extension leads for them due to the local location of the PC. Next, I wondered how I was going to be able to use a keyboard and mouse with it. I considered a tray of some sort, but thought it would look bad and I would mean drilling through holes in the cabinet to get the cables through, so I decided to look for a Bluetooth and wireless one. After browsing the internet, I saw one with a built-in touchpad and thought it would resolve these issues, and it did. Next was the lighting in the marquee part. I went to an electrical shop in Sheffield and explained that I was looking for what I was looking for, and they just had just the thing, a smaller version that would fit perfectly, and it did. Now the lighting was sorted, I needed a marquee for it. I bought one from eBay, but it was too large, and due to the glass being used, it would have broken if I tried to cut it. I found a printing company in Manchester and emailed them explaining the size of the marquee. They replied it won't be a problem to print that size. I used a program called Page Plus and designed and printed several different marquees. I bought several plastic frameless picture frames and cut the plastic to size and stuck each marquee to each piece of plastic, ready to be used in the machine. Finally, I needed a power supply that would power the PC, monitor, speakers, marquee light, powered for USB, and anything else. I tried various ones, individually switched ones, but it meant I had to go behind the machine to switch it on, which wasn't ideal at all, given what I was at the side of it, and every time I was doing it, I looked like I was doing yoga every time. I found one that had 8 sockets, but had an individual switch for them all, so it's perfect. However, the PC wouldn't turn on unless a power button is pressed. I found an option in the BIOS that will turn it on in the event of a power cut, which works the same as turning the extensions on, then off, and then on. I considered using an app that loaded straight into a front end by bypassing Windows completely, but decided that it would be too restrictive, so I decided to stay with my favourite, Emuloader. What I wanted to do was be able to use the joysticks and buttons to select the game and start it, instead of having to use a keyboard. After searching the web, I found Control MK that I used to configure so that left and right do page up and page down respectively, and button 1 selects the game to play. Up and down go through the games list one at a time. Next, I had to configure Mame to use the relevant controls for each player. That was straightforward enough, but then I wondered how to use the stick and buttons to insert a credit without starting the game automatically, and how to quit the game and return to the menu. After various combination testing and problem identifying, I found that the easiest option was to have all 3 fire buttons pressed to insert a credit and to quit, to use buttons 2, 3 and player 1 to start together. This worked perfectly. I'd seen some red joysticks on eBay that I thought I'd be able to use to replace the black ones, so I bought them and replaced both joysticks and tried them out. They were awful. The micro switches weren't good at all. They wouldn't return to the centre properly and kept sticking. I'd had them a long time, so I couldn't return them, so instead I continued to the original joysticks that came with it. Months passed. Years passed. I failed using eBay, so I contacted a fantastic guy, Todd Tuckey, via his YouTube group, TNT Amusements Incorporated, regarding obtaining equivalent red joysticks, and he said they're very hard to obtain now. I was suggested buying a Pac-Man type controller, but I was determined to find one the same as I'd already had. I browsed through YouTube arcade videos and saw one from someone who had several machines, including a Senti one like mine. I messaged him and asked if he had any spare. Luckily he did, but they were black. But after a fortnight he found that he also had some red ones. I bought them off him, and he threw some buttons in for free as well. I didn't then use the machine much, partly due to the games not working as good as they should be, partly due to children's toys being in front of it, so I can't get to it, and I'd lost a bit of interest in it as well. A friend had an old PC that he didn't use, and my son was wanting one to play games on. He offered it for me for free, so I was extremely grateful. He took him up on his very kind gesture. My son played a few games on it, but he wasn't overly impressed, and his interest quickly waned, and he slept under his bed for weeks and weeks and weeks. Until I decided to see if the PC would be able to play Mame any better. It came with a square 17-inch monitor and the games played perfectly 99.99% of the time. A few months prior I bought a second-hand 19-inch square monitor, but I hadn't tried it. After the great emulation with the new PC, I decided to replace my old PC with this one. I swapped the PCs and tested the 19-inch monitor for the first time. Luckily it worked perfectly, so I then had the struggle of working out how to get it to stay in the machine, as a previous setup wouldn't work with this one. I connected the base unit to it, but it was too long to use in the machine as the glass front was closer to the monitor than the end of the base. I turned up the wooden holder from one side to the other, but it still wouldn't fit securely. A few minutes later I decided the best option was to have something like a holder for it. I tried various things to do it and eventually found two door hinges. When turned sideways it acts like a holder. I put some Gorilla Glue on it to keep it sticking up. No rude jokes. Then I tried to use the black background card that came with the original arcade monitor, but that didn't work very well, and neither did the black tape I used, so I ended up buying some black card and stuck that with some blue tack to see how it works. So far so good. I wanted to use bezels, the part around the screen, that can be obtained from websites for free as zip files. Some websites may charge, but I wouldn't pay for them at all. The free ones may have to be selected individually, but once you're done, that's it. I placed the files in the artwork folder in Mame directory and enabled the option in Emuloader. You can set the bezels for each game if you don't want them enabled. You can choose to have them be shown as full size or cropped, depending on the screen size. I did find some issues of stuttering when using the bezels and tearing used in the scanline options by parts of the screen, which were rectified by changing the window screen from 75Hz to 60Hz, making sure priority is 0 by default. I changed it to 1 thinking the games would play smoother. I also changed the black joystick for the red one, and that was a challenge as it had various screws that needed removing. The other emulators I can use on the machine are the Commodore 64 and Amiga computers, Nintendo NES and SNES, Sega Master System and Mega Drive, plus lots of others that can be run on a Windows 7 PC. Other than the odd display things with UAE, the Amiga emulator, most of the other emulators run perfectly fine. If you want some free smartwatch watch faces, head over to my Facebook page and subscribe in order to see all the available ones. If you found this video useful and inspiring, please give me a like, subscribe to my channel, leave me a comment or do something else instead. Hope you've enjoyed the video, thanks for watching.